Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening at Dunbar High School, and thanks to the Dunbar High School staff for setting this up for us. My name is Kathleen Morgan. I represent District 7 on the Lee County School Board, and I'm the current board chair. Before we begin, let's please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Board members attending this evening are Mary Fisher, District 1, Chris Patrica, District 3, Pamela Riviere, District 5, Jane Kuckel, District 6. Melissa Giovanelli won't be joining us this evening due to a family emergency. Dr. Adkins, our superintendent, and Robert Dodig, our board attorney, is on the end. We want to thank the news press for requesting the opportunity to address the board in this board workshop. And members of the public, I just want you to know that board workshops are business meetings of the board, and per board policy, there will not be public comment. Mr. Tom Hayden, Senior Engagement Editor for the News Press, will introduce the members of the editorial board and open with some general questions of me.
I will. Thank you, Kathleen. I'd like to introduce our editorial board, which is to my right. First is Cindy McCurry-Ross, our Executive Editor. Then we have Corey O'Donnell, our Digital Engagement Editor. Then we have Yemisi Olarantola Coates. Was I close on that, Yemisi? Okay. Then we have Bobby D'Alessandro, who's also a former superintendent of Lee Schools. Indira Demine is next to her, and Michael Chapman. They are citizen members on the board. Wanted to take just a minute to say why we were doing this. We thought this is a big issue. The people to my left are asking you to spend some of your tax money. Not always easy to do. The editorial board in the past has supported the half-cent sales tax. We believe it's a plan that will help fill the needs to maintain the schools, to build new schools. But we also know there's some of you out there that may not trust how the district is spending their money now, and questions about how they'll spend this money, and we hope to answer some of those questions tonight. I'm going to kind of act as referee or mediator tonight to the school board members as we ask the questions. Don't feel like you all have to answer every question, and since we're in the school, I'll ask you to raise your hand to answer the questions. Our board has put together what I think is a good series of questions, but we're going to start and try and frame the subject. We also ask the audience to be respectful of the questions and all the answers that will come from the school board members tonight. To try and frame the topic the best we can, I'm going to ask our chair, school board chair Kathleen Morgan, to answer 5 questions that I've put together, and we'll start with, how and why did you arrive on the half-cent sales tax referendum?
Thank you, Tom. During the recession, decisions were made at the state and county level to reduce capital funding for public schools, funding that was not subsequently restored. Capital funds are used for building new schools, rebuilding and adding to existing schools, facility improvements, technology, program enhancements, and safety and security. Following the recession, we annually requested the state legislature restore the capital millage they cut in 2008 and 2009. There has been no movement on that request, and state funds previously directed to capital funding for public school districts are being directed elsewhere. We also requested the county restore impact fees to their pre-recession levels. Today, we collect only 45% of the impact fees pre-recession. Because of the reduction in capital revenues, the district began cutting its maintenance budget to fund other capital needs, but the student population growth of 1,500 to 2,000 students per year continued, and student seating, and by 2012, student seating capacity was approaching its max. By 2014, we knew we needed to find additional sources of revenue. We had already initiated cost-saving measures like improved energy efficiency and refinancing our debt at lower rates. By 2016, we were exploring new sources of revenue, selling outdated assets, exploring new sources of revenue. Selling outdated assets, selling advertising on our website, and selling district property naming rights. Despite our efforts, the gap between what we needed to do and the projected funds to pay for those needs was growing. We knew we were facing a capital funding crisis. In 2017, looking at our capital funding requirement for the next 5 years, we estimated our capital fund gap to be about $478 million. Accepting that additional state and county revenues would not be forthcoming, we had only 2 options left, both local. Ask the public to approve an increase in property tax. An increase in property tax would generate an estimated $39 million annually. The burden of that tax would fall solely on property owners. Or we could ask the public to approve a sales tax. Sales tax is paid by everyone, and in Lee County, an estimated 25 to 30% of the sales tax is paid by tourists. The sales tax would generate approximately $59 million annually. We decided to move forward with the sales tax option because of the larger tax base and the amount that would be collected.
And Kathleen, who pays the sales tax?
The general public pays the sales tax on taxable goods. Again, tourists generate approximately 25 to 30% of the sales tax revenue in Lee County.
You kind of answered my third question, so we'll skip that one. But what is the tax applied to, and what isn't it applied to?
The tax does not apply to necessities like food, gasoline, and medicine. The tax will be applied only up to the first $5,000 of a single purchase. The maximum tax paid on any item will be $25. The average Lee County family of 4 with an income of $50,000 will pay approximately $64 in new sales taxes.
And if the tax passes, how soon will the district begin collecting money, and how soon would projects begin?
The district will begin collecting taxes on January 1st, 2019. The tax will sunset on December 31st, 2028. Projects are in the works already. If the sales tax does not pass, we will simply borrow more money to meet our capital needs. As we repay our debt, taxpayer dollars will go back to banks instead of back into the schools.
All right, now we'll start with our line of questions from the editorial board. Indira, you're first.
Kathleen, you touched on this a little bit, but why was it that this became the year for the referendum? What happened within the district that put you in the position where the sales tax was the only option?
You want to let the board, since you've been not that you haven't given great answers, but.
Would somebody else like to jump in on that?
I'll be glad to share my thoughts. When I ran for board in the spring and summer of 2014, I attended the board meetings, briefing meetings, which are probably where you get more of your information than at the action meetings. And I saw at that time when sales tax was presented as one of the options, along with if we went for going back to 100% of the impact fees, as well as property taxes. The only option, as I looked at that, I realized the only feasible one that varies with the whole community as a whole, and our tourists would carry the brunt of that, would be the sales tax. That it seemed to me a fair option. The only problem was this. We actually voted on the sales tax referendum, I believe it was in 2015, as to whether or not we wanted to go forward with that. At that time, we did not believe that we as a governance team had approached the point where we had confidence of people in the community. Right now, this year, I can say that as we move forward, we have amazing leadership. I keep telling people we have a new sheriff in town, and sometimes it takes a while for all of those policies to get implemented. But I see us working smarter, harder, smoother, and more cohesively as a team. Granted, yes, there are going to be times we have difference of opinion, but there's a mutual respect and an understanding that's taking place that we felt like now was the time, and as we saw our need growing, we realized, and I realized for myself, it was time to take action. We couldn't wait much longer. Because I believe it is the responsibility of this generation to take care of the incoming generation and not burden them.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, we'll move on to our next question. Bobby?
What is your contingency plan if the tax fails? What other options are you looking at? What is your contingency plan if the tax fails? What other options are you looking at?
We will continue, we will proceed with the plans that we have for capital funding, whether it's building new schools, adding to schools, renovating schools, making the purchases that we need to make to ensure that our schools are safe and secure. But we will have to borrow in order to do that. And right now, we're paying approximately $50 million in carry costs for the debt that we have. And that debt will roll off the books, but what we will have to do is simply take on new debt and continue to carry the cost of that debt out into the future. And that means that taxpayer dollars on the order of $50 million a year will come in and go straight to the banks and won't go to us. But we are committed to proceeding at this point with the building plans that we have shared with the public, the MMM High School, the addition to Lehigh Senior, and some of the other projects that have been outlined.
I'd also like to add, what we'll do, as Ms. Morgan said, we have a district to run and we will continue to run it. However, pragmatically, it won't be the most efficient way. Because you know, when you have a household, when you don't have enough money, you make things work. You just stretch the dollar. So what that happens in 2010, we had a preventative maintenance system on all our major appliances and all our capital. We repaired and replaced roofs and buses and air conditioner units, ACs, all those type of units before they broke or at the point of their life expectancy lifespan. We now have buses on the road that are 15 and 18 years old. What does that mean? That we take a bus and we drive it, and it has to go three times a day, and the elementary time it breaks down halfway, at the middle of the route. We have to send another bus out, grab all those children, bring them to school. They arrive late. That sets back the next 2 tiers. Those children will all be late. So now you've just impacted education. But now what you also did is now you take that bus and now you have to expedite in the parts that you didn't plan on because you're not having planned maintenance. So now you have to expedite more expense. You have to run overtime to fix those buses that weren't on the schedule. So now not only are you impacting and borrowing on the capital side, now you're draining money from the operational side, which statutorily we can't cross paths, but that is an operating expense to repair inefficiently our IC units, our buses, and so on, taking money out of classrooms, away from teachers, and away from supplies. And that gets exacerbated as we go for AC units and all the major appliances that we can do, let alone just the building and capital that we have to do to maintain seats for our children.
Thank you. Michael?
My question is directed to anyone on the board, and that is, how do you see the sales tax influencing your commitment to school safety?
Well, one of the things that I was going to say before was the sales tax is not the unilateral answer for us. It is a part of the solution to incurring more debt. And as far as the sales tax with school safety, that will have a huge impact because capital funding, which the sales tax is, can be used for building, maintenance, safety, technology, and debt reduction. So with the new funding that we have from the state, which is not permanent or sustainable, that we're starting to increase our safety, hardening of the schools, and our mental health services. This will give us an opportunity then to continue that on in future years.
Anyone? Pam?
And another thought that really is an inevitable piece is if we are running short on capital. I was here in the early 70s when school district was short on capital, and I was on double session. It was a modified double session, And I remember those days. I remember, and then I think about, as you were talking, Mr. Teuber, about transportation, what are we doing, the impact it's going to have then on our transportation and general operations. There is all of the different options as we look at them. If the sales tax isn't passed, we will continue functioning. We will continue doing what we can for education. But I see us incurring more debt at more risky business, and that it also then affects our student safety in the same time.
I would like to tell people that on our referendum project list, we've allocated $57 million for lockdown view panels, which will allow central office or school building people to control access, surveillance with integrated technology, single point entry, physical and technology, hardened doors, and ADA safety improvements. As a district, what we have done historically is when we build a new school, we look at, well, there are two things that happen. One, when there is an incident or we learn about something that, an enhanced security feature, we will roll that out slowly through all of our schools as we can afford to do so. When we build a new high school like Bonita High School, we put that new technology in there, and then in the way we used to handle it, we would over time deploy the same technology throughout the district. But this plan will enable us to make certain that there is equitable and equal safety and security in each and every school in the school district.
Thank you. Yemisi?
Yes. How do you see the capital money and maintenance of schools providing a better environment for students to learn, specifically improving FSA scores?
Again, it goes back to, you know, our schools were designed to house a certain amount of children and students for optimum learning. And so when you start having issues as far as to be able to provide the seats, when we're one of the only few districts in the state that are growing 1,500 to 1,800 students every year, we increase the numbers of students that we can in every place that we can. Adding portables is a solution that we currently resort to, and we'll continue to resort to portables. Unfortunately, the hallways aren't designed for the extra flow of kids. The cafeterias, the parking, all of that becomes exacerbated, and it really puts more stress on the students from transition to transition. Also, you know, in a portable is far less academically sound than in a regular classroom. So all of those issues, when you don't have capital to provide the quality education, and same thing with technology, when we can't update our technology as the technology advances, we're pushing right now a really big push on VOTEC. Well, we have to have all the equipment, the electronics and the diagnostics in those particular fields. Right now, if we don't keep up with what's out there in the current world, they go out there with antiquated skills, with antiquated machines, it's obsolete, and their education provides no value for them as they continue on to serve our community. So all of those are capital expenses that directly impact public education. As far as the FSAs, again, we talk about when you lose an air conditioner and you can't recover on an AC until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, lose a day of education, that directly impacts our FSA. When we don't have the time, the quality time, to have an environment that's conducive to learning, that is directly impacting our FSAs.
I think there's one more big factor. If you're talking about efficient and effective use of tax dollars, when we do not build our schools up front, then we pay double for housing. We initially put students in our trailers or in our mobiles, and then we still have to build a school for them. Dr. Atkins, how much does it take to set up a portable?
It takes approximately $67,000 to set up a portable right now. That includes, you think about running security, electric to the portable. You also have to think about lease costs, etc. So $67,000. We just did that number.
And right now we have about 170 portables throughout the district that are housing students that then will have to be taken down. And not only that, we've paid to house them this way, now we have to pay to house them another way. that is not an effective use of your tax dollars or mine.
Bobby, you know what I think you should do with this next question? I think you should direct it at school board member Patrica, because she has yet to answer a question. You know, I'm like the teacher and seeing the student in the back of the classroom and putting her head down, doesn't want to say anything. So,
I think this is perfect, Chris. In readdressing the issue of the tax not passing, how does a no vote negatively impact transportation and influence the discussion of schools going to double sessions? There's quite an echo in here. Did you understand me?
How does a no vote
negatively impact transportation and influence the discussion of schools going to double sessions?
This is the first time I'm answering a question because I'm very shy. So,
yeah, sure. And snowing now in Dunbar High School.
It negatively impacts transportation because our schools are at or above capacity, which means that the areas of the county that are seeing the most growth, we have to bus those students to other schools where there might be some capacity, so that obviously increases our transportation costs. And I know that Ms. LaRiviere mentioned double sessions earlier, but I get a bit of a sense of panic in the pit of my stomach when I think about double sessions and the potential reality of that. I have asked our Chief of Finance to forecast when we as a board will have to have that conversation. Because if we don't get additional revenue, I'm not comfortable with continuing to borrow and borrow and borrow and decrease the amount of money available to maintain the schools we already have. I'm not comfortable with having shiny, brand new, beautiful, high-tech schools in some areas of the county and running down dilapidated schools in other parts of the county. So if we can't borrow and maintain, that leads us to a discussion about double sessions and or split sessions. And as a parent with 4 children in the system, I don't know how I would manage my family on split sessions or on double sessions. It would be tremendously difficult for me with my work schedule, my husband with his work schedule, my children with their school schedule and their extracurricular activities. So again, the panic in the pit of my stomach is real. And you know, this action this board is taking in seeking a half-penny sales tax is proactive. We are not being reactive. If we were having this discussion 5 years from now, that would be reactive. But right now we're trying to make sure that those problems don't present themselves so that we can continue to provide quality education to our students.
Quick follow-up. I hear that if there is a no vote, that the district will continue developing and meeting its maintenance needs by borrowing. But I also am hearing now some discomfort with continuing to take on additional debt. So I'd love to hear from each of the board members what your comfort is with taking on additional debt on an ongoing basis. Because if it doesn't pass this year, it could be quite a while before you could bring such referendum before the voters again.
You want me to start? Okay. Right now we're a AA2 bond rated school district, which is a good rating nationally. We have capacity to borrow. I believe it was Ms. Patrica who said that as we borrow, we pay out of our capital. So as our borrowing goes up, our cost of borrowing goes up, the amount of available funds we have to operate with in the capital budget goes down, and at some point it approaches zero. So yes, there is a point at which it is no longer possible for us to borrow because we will be cannibalizing the assets that the taxpayers have already made a significant investment in. I don't know what that point is. I do know that we need to discuss as we move forward with each project, and MMM is the next project coming up. We will need to discuss whether we want to proceed with borrowing. That's my answer.
I'll just repeat the figure, $52 million last year. With another building, it'll be in the 60-some million dollars a year. Now think what that could do for other aspects of our district. $52 million a year that the taxpayers are sending to our schools that we have to defer to banks and principal and interest. That just weighs on me heavily every day.
I agree. You know, the big problem, and as Ms. Petricka said, we're being reactive. The problem that we're facing is, of the 67 counties, 63 of these counties have already, when the problem manifested when they took away the 0.5 capital dollars back in 2007, 2008, since that time, there's been every district but us and 4 others have actually put through some type of tax to cover up that deficit. We have not. And so, and of those ones that have not, we're the only one that's growing 1,800 students a year. And you would think the legislature would give some type of formula to be able to fund new students in your district, but they don't. So it falls strictly on Lee County. So what's going to happen is, as Ms. Morgan said, is we continue to borrow, our ratings will drop down. That means our interest rate will go up. So it becomes a spiral that we start getting, the more we borrow, the less money we actually get, the more money we incur into debt. And at the same time, while that's all happening, we continue to run an inefficient capital side, which takes away from our operating side, which makes us not be competitive for our teachers. The Lee County or Collier County just raised their salaries, and they're going to go after another referendum, as is Charlotte, as is Sarasota. Sarasota just passed another referendum. They will continue to increase salaries. We can't compete. So you're going to have teachers in the district, any of them that do stay, working over classroom size that's going to be way overcrowded. The cafeterias are going to be overcrowded. The buses are going to be inefficient and not arriving on time. Our school district will become less and less efficient and less desirable, which will make Lee County less and less desirable. We want to be a flagship, and Dr. Atkins has a vision to make us one of the best districts in the state, if not the nation. We can't do that if we're not properly funded. When we start to borrow, it's just the beginning to the end of the slippery slope that we're going down to drive us into a district that is no longer world class.
Okay, so currently about 45%, a little bit more than 45% of our budget goes to pay down debt. The state allows up to 75% of our capital budget to be used to pay debt service. Ms. Morgan mentioned earlier that we have a very good bond rating. Our bond rating is actually higher than that of the average school district, not just across the state of Florida, but across the nation. And I know that there's some concern in the public that we're not managing money well, but that is an independent indicator of the fact that we have been good stewards of taxpayer dollars. My comfort level in terms of debt is very, very low. I am a fiscal conservative, and the idea of borrowing money, Mr. Toiber said, it will impact our bond rating, which will increase our interest rates. But the other thing that will increase our interest rates is the economy. Every economic forecast shows that we're looking at 4 imminent interest rate hikes coming up in the very near future. So it's a cycle that we don't want to be caught in. I believe that it is the fiscally responsible thing to do, to pay for schools with revenue as opposed to paying for schools through borrowing. Keeping that money here in Lee County, hiring contractors here in Lee County, creating jobs for contractors here in Lee County. I believe that's the fiscally responsible thing to do. Oh, my bad.
I want to go back. The question was, how much debt am I comfortable with? And I will say the debt that I am comfortable with is far more debt than my husband's comfort level. And I believe running the school district, I need to think like my husband and go with very little debt. Thank you, Ms. Petricka, for bringing in the current projections right now for the economy. When we stop and we make decisions, people don't see all of the different components that we research and we look at, that we use to ponder, to come with moving forward. It's looking at and talking with financial advisors, talking with financial attorneys, tax attorneys, other people that can provide us with other input to help us with our decision-making process. But I want to stay at the level where we are because I have fear that we will no longer be at a point where we will be able to refinance our loans for better rates. I believe that time is coming to an end. I also feel the frustration that what we have to do to our schools to keep them up to the SRF code is a higher standard than private schools, charter schools, any other schools have to live up to, because we have to have that higher standard so we can have schools that will provide safe havens for our community. Put all of that together, it's very difficult to build a school economically. I know there are other schools that are on the we're on the projected list that have been taken off for tear down and rebuild for that very thing. So at this point, I will do up to a little bit, but I don't want us to go much further. And I'm also concerned because of this. It's not to determine our credit rating, it's not just how much debt we have, but how much we have in reserves. At this point, it's very hard keeping our reserves at the higher level where it's been. We've had to dip into those. So it's not just how much debt, it's how much we have to go into reserves. And we're reaching a crossroads where personally I don't feel very comfortable about moving forward with more debt. Not with the way things are going.
Thank you. So as we continue on, we recently went through the OPAGA audit, which was required because we did vote to put the sales tax referendum on the ballot. And it showed that we have a good level of efficiency and effectiveness, and that we have recently made some areas of improvement. We have had some mistakes and errors that have been notably forecast in the news, and we have taken responsibility for that and changed our process and continue to work at strategies to increase our efficiency. We continue to seek more revenue resources, and even if we get a yes vote, we'll continue to do that. We rent out land for cell towers, billboards, we have business partners. We're looking at selling and leasing land that we own. We take a comprehensive approach and leave no stone unturned. The reality is that for the past decade, although we have continued to grow, we have experienced budget cuts. And today, with our budget of $1.4 billion, which is less than it was 10 years ago, we are struggling to make ends meet. Our capital funds are now $118 million, compared with $318 million a year 10 years ago in 2007. So as any homeowner knows, and I was with a group of ladies this afternoon, and they were saying, why don't people get it that you guys need the sales tax? Just in our own homes, we're constantly having things break and wear out, and we're having to invest in spending them, in fixing those. So we need to continue, in addition to building schools to accommodate the large growth that we have, to maintain our facilities. And our ideal thing would be not to incur more debt, because then that takes away our possibilities for doing just that. So I think that for our community, this is an investment in not only in our youth, it's kind of like pay now or pay later, because I did some research, and do you know that people who don't have a good learning environment might tend to drop out of school? And a lot of those people do end up in the criminal justice system. It costs 9 times more per year to house an inmate than it does to educate a student in our schools. So I think that we need to take a hard look at that. And the other thing I wanted to mention was that out of the 67 counties in Florida, we are one of only 6 who do not have a sales or surtax. So I think that also, if we did have to take drastic steps and go to double sessions, which when I first moved here, My kids were on double sessions, and that was in the late 70s and early 80s, and it was a nightmare then. I cannot imagine this community with a child care crisis on its hands, because that's exactly what they would have. So I think that we've made a well thought out and wise decision to vote to put this on the referendum, and now are working hard to educate our community so that they can make their best decision when they go to the polls in November or before.
Thanks, Mary. Superintendent Atkins, I really hate to leave you out. What's your debt uneasiness level these days?
Well, it's pretty significant when you think about the fact that you have to use the 1.5 mils to pay back the debt. And the reason that I have a large concern there is that, you know, you're looking at maintenance of our buildings, which is already a struggle, you know, and keeping up with that is going to get significantly worse if we have to borrow additional dollars and then have to allocate additional dollars to pay the debt. So, you know, I've been around to a number of buildings already this year. Example, San Carlos Elementary, we've got significant roof leaks down there, and we're really just doing some patchwork to get by, but it needs a new roof. The district office, we have a number of roof leaks in our district office. It needs work. But more concern is something like Ida S. Baker High School, which you go out there and you've got all the rooms on the ground floor that are warm because you've got an air handler problem, because there was a cheap air conditioning system, HVAC system, that was purchased, which we're now having to replace to the tune of like, you know, $3 to $4.5 million to do those chiller plants. So right now, I've already given direction for our maintenance team to start to reduce the amount of maintenance that we're able to do to our schools, because we have less money than we had the year before. So we're trying to improve communication to our schools so that they know what to expect moving forward. We're not going to be able to replace those things as quickly. So for that reason, my angst about all of this taking on more debt is high, more for the amount that we have to pay out and the less money we'll have for maintenance.
Michael?
Thank you, Tom. Do you believe the board has been as transparent as it should be and been accessible to the general public, keeping them informed of debt and capital needs?
Well, I will say I've been on the board for 6 years. We have been talking about this coming crisis ever since I joined the board in 2012. It became obvious that it was a crisis around 14-15 when we ran out of seats. At that point, we were already planning for what was next. And that's when Bonita High School was put on the drawing boards.
I think we've been as transparent as possible. Our audits going back to 2010 are right on the district website for anyone to see. Our budget books going back to 03, 04 are right on our website, available for anyone to see. The OPAGA audit that was required by the state was released, I believe, the day we got it, right? Friday, the day that we got it. I ran on a platform of addressing the capital crisis that was facing the district. I know that this board talked about it for years before I joined the board. We're doing our best to get out to the public and share the information. I don't know if you're as disappointed as I am by the empty auditorium that's here. I did have a conversation with a dear friend of mine. She's an attorney, she has 2 children, her husband is a stay-at-home dad. And I asked, how do I get you engaged in this conversation? And she said, Chris, I just don't have time. You know, I have to get my kids to their after-school activities, I have to get to work every day, I have to travel for work, and this just is not a priority for me. So I don't know how to engage the public in this conversation beyond doing what we're doing, which is going to every group that meets. I say all the time, if there's a room with 2 or more people in it, I will go and I will present this information, because it really is essential to our students. You know, I hear Dr. Atkins talk about chiller plants and HVAC systems, and we lose sight of the fact that these are children in classrooms. These are children that we're talking about, and it feels to me sometimes like public education is under attack, especially in the state of Florida. And really, when you're attacking public education, you're attacking children. And we're trying to find solutions for children in Lee County School District because they deserve it. They deserve a learning environment in which they can concentrate because they're not too hot. They deserve a gymnasium where they can go to PE and be able to run around and not slip and fall because water from the rain is coming into the building. I think our children deserve that. I forgot the question.
And our community deserves a high-quality school system. Our employers deserve the very best skilled and knowledgeable students coming out of our high schools. And that takes money. You know, one of the areas that we don't talk about very much, we talk about the K-12 education, but we know that only about 25% of our graduating seniors, and this is nationwide, go on and get a 4-year college degree. So we have 75% of our students to prepare to go out into the workplace. And we have worked very hard at having academies in all of our schools related to the trades, welding, the HVAC now down at Bonita Springs, and that takes money. All of our medical academies have a setup of a hospital room or a doctor's office, and that takes money to buy the equipment to make sure that 75% of our kids are very successful too, and that our employers can count on that, and that we attract businesses from outside of the community. From my perspective, this is just a huge community decision. What kind of school system do you want? And when you enroll your student, do you want to be told that that student's going to be out in one of the portables or trailers, as they're calling them? And when we have inclement weather, they're brought inside to the gym or inside to the auditorium. That's not a high-quality school system. So we on the board and our staff and many people in our community want our school system to stand out. And so I think that's a huge message to everybody to get out. It's a choice. Do you want a school system that's state-of-the-art, that prepares our students for college, for workforce, for whatever they might meet when they get out of school? And if you even think about technology, it changes daily. The technology expenses come out of our capital funding. And so that's really where it's all about, and it's the future of Lee County that is at stake here.
Excuse me, I really want to go back to your question, Mr. Chapman, about transparency. And it's not that we're avoiding that, I don't believe. I believe we're all we're passionate about this because we're dealing with people. I don't know how much more transparent we can get. If people, it's about, everything is available at the website to go back and view every single one of our briefing meetings where we've discussed this, where we've looked at the numbers. All of our briefing meetings are available to either attend live or to go back and view later. I don't want to repeat everything that others have said, but if you have questions out and with our budget and you have looked at it online but you still have questions, we will gladly schedule meetings with you to go over that budget with our Chief Financial Officer and people within the department. If you have questions regarding operations and transportation, and we will show you the books and show you how, by the way, we've saved over $1 million this year in transportation through smart decision making. We will gladly go through and show and explain everything to you. No one is trying to keep anything away from the public. So I don't know how much more transparency is needed, and it goes back to, I believe we hear sound bites. I hear a sound bite by some people who say, oh, well, I'll switch it to, Lee County Commissioners just weren't very honest with us about a certain thing. And I hear someone say that. So then I repeated, well, you know, they weren't very honest. Same thing happens with us as a school board member. If someone hears, oh, they're not being transparent, people start saying, you know, the school board's not very transparent. People don't generally stop and check things out because of time, because of what's going on in your life, in your family. If you want to avail yourself of anything, we will work together. Dr. Atkins will work to make sure staff and others are available to make sure that you have every resource at your fingertips and explain to you as much as possible.
So if we shift it from transparency to, and Chris, you mentioned it, you know, this isn't a very good crowd here tonight. You haven't had very good crowds at any of your sales tax forums or town halls. Why aren't people listening to you? Because I personally believe that over 50% of this county doesn't even realize this is on the ballot in November. How can you possibly, in the 6 weeks before mail ballots start going out, can you hope to make a dent in a community that doesn't appear to be listening to you now?
So that's the million-dollar question. As long as I've been in education, getting parent and community involvement has been the most difficult part. So we have often had this conversation about if we could only do a better job telling our story and people could understand what's really happening every day in the schools, then they would know and they'd support us. We have social media. I mean, we have done everything that has come down the pike to be able to tell the story and involve parents and community more. But like Chris's friend said to her, people are busy and they don't have the time. We've got a ton of information on our website, but who takes the time to go and look at it? I don't even know how many hits we get. So I think that when people come to me with a complaint now, I say, listen, pick any school in the district, go there, spend 3 hours, and then come back and let's talk. We are constantly recognizing students, like recently a student from this very school who is the world Microsoft champion this year. I mean, we are doing good work and we are preparing the future workforce of our community. Education is the economic driver. And I would say that there may not be a faster way to ruin the county's economy or to ruin children's job opportunities for the future than skimping on education.
So I think Ms. LaRiviere mentioned earlier that the previous board talked about a half-penny sales tax back, was it 2015? And the board did not agree to pursue it at that time because the community support wasn't there. Well, the community support is there now. A political action committee has formed outside the district. It's called Quality Schools for the Future, and it is run by community leaders, business leaders who have taken an interest in our schools. Superintendent Atkins put together a business roundtable that was made up of some of the most successful business leaders here in Lee County. They took a deep dive into our budget. They looked at it, they pulled it apart, and they said there are no other options here. Our Finance Advisory Committee recommended that we pursue a half-penny sales tax. So how are we going to get the word out? I believe that I have done everything humanly possible. I give 2, 3, sometimes 4 presentations a day. Whatever the ladies schedule for me, I will do. Now it is up to our business leaders who have formed this political action committee to actually run a campaign. So what you picture for a political campaign, yard signs, commercials, that kind of thing, we can't get involved in that. As a district, we are not allowed to expend any money on that, understandably. But thankfully, our business leaders have undertaken that endeavor, and they will they'll move forward with that.
Thank you for doing this. Let's talk a little bit about teachers. How would current strategies involving increases in teacher pay and improving teacher retention rates come into play should the state tax pass? And does that extra revenue free up money that can go to teachers?
The state legislature has actually categorize monies as operations and capital, and those two cannot be crossed over except for some very unique situations. But for the most part, all the operating, keep the lights on, the buses running, the teachers' pay, which is a major portion of our operation budget, is on the operations side. So the capital side does not impact that directly. However, I already told you, if we run an inefficient capital side, we have to pull extra operating dollars, overtime, all those type of monies get weaned off of the operating budget that make the dollars less available on the operating side. So that's one of the reasons. The second thing is, if you ask a teacher, pay is important, but other things make a teaching environment, why teachers stay and our turnover rate and continue to go up. If we put more children in the classroom, we have desks that are not to par, technology that's not to par, all the things that they need to deliver their program in an efficient manner, it's just not available because we don't have the capital dollars. That becomes teacher quality as far as what they need to do actually perform in their jobs. So we start losing those teachers. And if we start having schools that, that their buses are continually late, or they're trying to put 32 kids students in a classroom, all those type of things, they become exacerbated. They're like, why would we have to teach here when we can go up to a different district where it's far easier. Our job is far easier. So those type of indirect costs are definitely impactful. They're both hand in hand, even though it's not directly. The teachers really should be supporting this immeasurably.
Dr. Atkins, we really should hear from you on this. If you don't mind, I hate putting you on the spot, but could you give some other insight to help with that added clarification regarding the teachers, and not just teachers, all of our staff?
One of the things that will allow us to continue to do is one of the things that we had done recently to try to help our capital budget. We had implemented this thing called a growth increment model, which is where you were moving operational dollars and expending them for capital purposes. So now recently, because of our budget crisis that we've had on the operational side as a result of the hurricane, we as a board and a governance team determined not to utilize those dollars in the upcoming future, which actually moving forward is going to allow us to continue to have that amount of dollars that used to be allocated for capital out of the operating budget, move back into the operational budget and used directly to pay salaries, which can be used for teachers and paraprofessionals. So that is something we were forced to do it this year. However, if the operational side of the budget was in good shape, then you'd be moving that back to the capital. But if you were able to supplement this with referendum dollars, then you would no longer have to do that moving forward. That's a piece of it. The other part of it is there are portions of the capital budget that we are allowed to use to fund certain positions that maintain a capital asset, such as in our maintenance department. The more that we're able to use capital dollars to be able to do that, as the state allows, would free up operational dollars, so you wouldn't have to pay people maintaining your capital assets out of any of the operational dollars, which puts it more back into the classroom, teachers, paraprofessionals, school-based administrators, etc.
Yeah, Tom, I'm going to skip forward in the script just because I want to get to that other question we talked about, because it's relevant to the earlier conversation about trust and transparency and public perception. Some of the members of our legislative delegation have been ultra-critical of the way the school district plans and handles its finances. They've been against the sales tax, and they supported a bill that required the aforementioned performance audit. That divide, that schism can affect the public's trust, obviously, when you have opinion makers and public leaders taking those positions. So why doesn't the school board and the school district have a better relationship with the lawmakers on whom we depend for state funding and support, and what are you doing about it?
Money. We are a district that was continued to grow during tough times, and we've had difficulty managing both our operating and our capital budget with the growth that we are experiencing. The state of Florida is not experiencing that growth statewide, so there's no appetite for raising taxes to meet the needs of smaller districts. So I would say that it's not that we don't communicate and we don't get along well, it's that we have a need, but they have a role to fill, and they feel they're doing their job by representing what needs to be done at the state level and not necessarily what we need at the local level.
I think, with all due respect, I think that was a safe answer. I think the state legislature is mad at you for a lawsuit that you filed against them over a bill that passed into law a couple of years ago, and I think they're holding that against you, and that has led to the current performance art that was added on at the last minute to a bill that passed. So, as you look at, why not drop the lawsuit? In other words, maybe get back in favor with the state legislature to get some of these other things accomplished. I mean, you know, why is it important to continue with the suit that may be adding to this divide between the two groups?
There's a much broader issue here, and that is the issue of local control. I was sitting in the audience when the district, when the court case was being heard in Tallahassee. And I heard the judge say, the state has been taking power away from you day by day, and you have done nothing. Why are you doing something now? And my answer is, because at some point we have to say no. We have to protect our ability to do our job. For example, the federal government gives us money for Title I, and we as a district make the decision about how to spend that money. We have schools that are desperately in need of funding that Title I money would satisfy, and we have schools that don't need that money. And so we have, one of the reasons we've been able to transform some of our more difficult schools is because we have been able to put resources where they need to be, And so what this, down to, thank you. What the state did was say, well, we're going to get in between the federal tax dollars and the local school district, and we're going to tell the local school district how to spend that money. And the money's going to be spent on a per pupil basis. From our point of view, that is a very inefficient and ineffective way to spend those dollars. And so are we supposed to say, well, okay, we'll make do? I think that from my point of view, the state legislature has been nicking away at our ability to make decisions that are in the best interests of our students. And I am not willing, as a board member, at this point to support rolling that back.
So continuing on that, the lawsuit regarding House Bill 7069, we are in that with 11 or 12 other districts. That bill is detrimental to public education. We have to share capital dollars with charter and private schools. And as a taxpayer, I have a little bit of a problem personally with that because I don't want my tax-paying dollar going to a for-profit private enterprise. Public schools are necessary. And the revenue, and as I said before, our revenue has decreased over the last 10 years, little by little, as with our local control. Each year, we give our legislative priorities to our local delegation and to the state. And we ask for, please let us have some local control. Let us do what we know is best for our community. But that doesn't happen. And we continue to get, although we have a constitutional authority, we also have to obey the state law. So we continue to get unfunded mandates. That is, you will do this, but we won't give you any money for it, while we continue to diminish your tax base. So I think at this point, we are all here to say that we are going to stand up for our students, our staff, and the tax-paying property owners in this community, and continue on with not only being part of that lawsuit, but to encourage and educate our community so that the taxpayers can make a well-informed decision. You know, sales taxes are actually popular, and many of our counties and school districts have already reduced their debt by putting a sales tax referendum on the ballot. And I guess my question now is this community ready to support its schools?
Dr. Atkins, did you have something you wanted
Did you want to address?
to say?
Well, the first part of that question is what have we been doing to try to improve our relationships with our local delegation, and you know, one of the example tomorrow we're sitting down with Senator Benaquisto and really focusing on areas of common need. The focus of that conversation has to do with many of our legislative platform issues, things that they can help us with, improving teacher retention and recruitment by helping streamline some of the certification requirements, working on Grow Your Own, providing scholarships for our kids to move on into FGC or FSW and become teachers, or even some of their students that are juniors and seniors doing the same thing, providing full tuition for our children to come back, become teachers, and come back to our schools. And then, of course, the Innovation School, which is the MOU that we most recently signed with Florida Gulf Coast University, but that is something that Senator Benaquisto and others have been actively involved in pursuing. So we're looking for areas of common ground. We also, I know this board has worked very hard to sit down with members of our local delegation. We even sit down with Matt Caldwell in our superintendent's cabinet and just ask any question. Here's the budget. We did the same with our county commissioners, all to try to answer every question that they have as it relates to our finances, our audits, our budget, and all this stuff is online. So in fact, you know, ironically, literally I think it was a week before the delegation came up with the letter, and we had been in Tallahassee and were visiting each single one of them, and you know, some of them were open with, you know, Caldwell, for example, did say, look, I just think there's a different way of doing this other than a referendum, and I'm concerned that they go on forever. But we tried to answer every single one of his questions. And I will say this FGCU thing is something they've been wanting us to pursue, and we're doing that. So again, we try to be an open book. We try to invite them to the table, and I think they have been willing to listen to us. So I think if we continue to do that, hopefully we'll find more common ground, because ultimately we all represent the children. We have to work together as a community, or we're simply not going to be able to get this job done.
Thank you for that. So Tom has been collecting questions from our readers, from our residents. And so this question is from one of our residents. He or she asks, how did the situation, actually they say fiasco, of the Bonita Springs High School happen? And to this person, this goes to trust, as we've been talking about. So considering that situation, this person trusted you then, but why should they trust you now?
I've addressed this quite a bit over the past several months, and so it's a little bit of a lengthy response, but we have to go back in history a little bit to start the conversation. The last time we built a high school in Lee County was about 10 years ago. Tell me the name of the high school. Island Coast. Island Coast was $22 million over budget. I don't know if you were at the news press then, but do you remember all the headlines about Island Coast being $22 million over budget? There were no headlines. We did not at that time have a superintendent and a board that were interested in transparency and interested in making sure that the taxpayers knew when we made a mistake. And we made a mistake at Bonita Springs. There is absolutely no doubt about it. The superintendent and his cabinet that is in place today was not involved in the construction of Island Coast High School. They had no way of knowing that the process that was in place then was broken. So fast forward to Bonita Springs High School and the construction. The board approved an amount to build that school. The estimate for the building of Bonita Springs High School was a gross underestimation of the actual cost to build the high school. As soon as the superintendent found out that it was an underestimation, he came to each board member. I want to say he found out on a Thursday. I have my individual board meeting with him on Monday. He immediately told me, and then he put it on a public agenda to tell the public what had happened. At the same time, he hired an outside consultant who came in and really beat up the process. Every step of the process that had taken place up to that point, made suggestions for changes going forward. We have implemented those changes, and in addition, that consultant also looked at the remaining phases for the build out of Bonita Springs High School, really beat up the process we had in place, made recommendations for changes, and we implemented those changes. When was the last time we read a headline in the news press about Bonita Springs High School being a problem? We haven't read one in a while because we took responsibility. We looked at the broken process. We made changes that are necessary in order to make sure this doesn't happen again. The bottom line is that in the state of Florida today, it costs $65 million to build a high school. This high school will come in at around $62 million. It costs between $34,000 and $36,000 per student station to build a high school in the state of Florida. Bonita Springs High School will come in at about $35,000 per student station. The original estimate for Bonita Springs High School was $23,000 per student station. This was not spending gone amok. This was human error. We made an error in the estimate, and there's been a massive overhaul of staff in the department that's responsible for building high schools. The individual responsible for the underestimation is no longer with the district, and other people are in charge of those functions. We've had our construction advisory committee make recommendations about process changes. We've had retirees who have moved here, made their millions in commercial construction in other parts of the country, come here and made recommendations about process changes, and we have accepted those recommendations. I believe as we sit here today, and I believe that this is reflected in the OPAGA audit, that we are now engaged in best practices for the building of high schools in the state of Florida. I believe that other districts across the state are going to turn to us now and ask us, how do you build schools so efficiently? So we made a mistake. I guess I can understand why it's a trust issue. That being said, we've been 100% transparent. We've said we made a mistake. We've accepted responsibility for that. And frankly, I don't think we should punish children because we had a process problem from 10 years ago.
And back to the trust issue, and they said they trust us now, and what should they feel? What you didn't get here, again, reported, okay, at $65 million is the average school cost. This new process and this new team actually brought back from our original approved numbers $3.2 million back into the school district, back into the capital budget. From the original budget, they returned $3.2 million in cost savings. Additionally, we are now one of the most expensive, most efficient per square foot buildings in the state of Florida. The reasons why the other schools, some schools across the district that are high schools that are being built at the same time as ours are a little bit cheaper is because for two reasons. Number one, the economy of a scale. They've actually got more student stations, so that actually amortizes out the big cost items like the stadiums and the cafeterias. And number two is they don't have the comprehensive programs that we have with our HVAC, our aviation. All those things cost extra money that we're not being funded for, but we did it anyway because that's what our students need to have career opportunities that they're not going to get from the regular university path. So the answer to the question to the community, the process step cost taxpayers absolutely nothing. What it did was it let this board the opportunity to address a challenge to a problem. We did it. The superintendent took the lead. He did the right thing. We now have a very robust process, and we are better, stronger, and more efficient with taxpayer dollars than we were before. So if anything, if it was properly brought forward to the public, they would be giving us accolades, rather like OPAGA did and all our audits have done, than to say, yeah, you made a mistake. It's not when you find a mistake or you come over, it's what you do when you're confronted with it. And Dr. Atkins and his team showed they immediately stepped up, took ownership. This board took ownership, and we fixed it, and we made it better than it was.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Talk about the timing of giving Superintendent Atkins a 14% raise and approving his contract well ahead of his start date, when you're asking the public for more money and teachers did not receive near that amount of an increase.
Well, I'll go first. Dr. Atkins for 3 years was grossly underpaid. When you look at what we set for that first contract, it was, personally, if I were to look at it again, I'd make the contract a little bit different because there was no opportunity for a raise each year. There was no opportunity for any performance bonuses. And we should have had it automatically end on June 30 at the end of a school year. We saved money. So we'll talk about some savings. So we saved some money there by his first contract. Secondly, we saved money by not doing an all-national search. So I am thinking that when you put all of those savings together and you put it in with what the current contract is, I believe it may pretty much even out. If we were to take the increase that we gave Dr. Atkins in this contract, if I were to stretch that out, even if I were just to stretch those monies out among all of our staff members, we're probably looking at the equivalent of a dollar extra, depending on how you would work those percentages. We are also looking at this part that we never considered when we first set up this contract. Our staff members need to know who's in charge for the upcoming school year. Our staff was a little bit uncertain as we were coming to the end of Dr. Atkins' 3-year contract, knowing that possibility they wanted to know if he was going to be here, that leadership was going to still continue. So we moved forward with going ahead with the contract because our staff, everyone needed to know so they could continue moving ahead and have confidence in this coming school year so that everyone would be prepared for the students and ready to move our students forward. We've also had significant cost savings with many of the efficiencies that he's brought forward. So I believe that he was worthy of it. And when you consider other school districts of similar dynamics, he's still in the lower quadrant.
The bottom line is, and people forget this aspect of public education, but we're a business, and we're a very large business. In fact, we're the second, if not the largest business in Lee County. And our CEO has to be compensated in a sense that if we don't lose him. There are 67 other counties, 66 other counties in the District of Florida. 5 of them right now are seeking superintendents that are much probably better situated as far as academically and financially. It would be a much easier job to be paid at substantially higher than what Dr. Atkins is making now. Now, granted, his roots are in Lee County, but when you're talking about such a disparity, when you're in the lowest quartile of your competitive field in Florida and nationwide, you have a chance of losing that. We have that problem across the board in Lee County, not only in our significant key roles. For example, our IT CEO can go to any IT platform, whether it be financial, medical, all across all the different industries, and do what he does at substantially higher. He is in one of the lowest quartiles that we have in the country. You know, the same thing with our superintendent. Our superintendent was disproportionately underpaid. Now, we don't as a board, and I don't believe personally you have to pay the highest, but you have to be competitive. You have to be where you take compensation as not a determining factor whether to leave. At this point where Dr. Atkins was and the success that he's shown over this past 3 years, everybody's noticed him at the state level. He's being noticed on the national level. We don't want to lose him. You wonder why Sarasota has been an A district for the last 12 years. It's continuity and stability, and a CEO that's being there with a vision and a past. You now see Collier County starting to take great traction because of their stability. We have Dr. Atkins, and we believe he is going to take Lee County to the next level and beyond. We need to make sure that compensation is not the reason why he's considering not taking that forward, because at some point it becomes a factor. And not saying that that is what was going to happen, but as managers, as the governing board, we have to take a look at all of our employees, our air conditioning people, our bus drivers, all of those people, to say, what do we need to do that we don't get the turnover rate that we're experiencing now, because we cannot be competitive in that particular industry. This was one that was the key one, because he is our CEO. We had to address that first, and it was paramount that we get it done.
You may.
Thank you. I just wanted to address the teacher issue. When I first joined the board almost 2 years ago, I knew that Dr. Atkins was underpaid, and I tried to have the conversation with him about his compensation, and he refused to have the conversation with me until we got teachers to the 55th percentile as compared to pay for other teachers across the state. So, you know, we're talking a little bit about what we need to keep him here. He was not willing to have that conversation about himself until he made sure his teachers were at least competitive across the state.
Dr. Atkins, I'm curious. This board's been incredibly supportive of you. The facts indicate that you were underpaid, but knowing what you faced in November with the sales tax, how much did you look at perception and say, is this really the right time for me to be asking for a 14% increase, or for any what have been called golden parachutes, whatever you want to call it, the other things that were added to the contracts? Did you ever think about the timing aspect of it, beyond the fact whether you deserved it or didn't deserve it, on whether it was right for you to be accepting this at this particular time?
Yeah, obviously the timing of this is something that I definitely looked at. One of the factors that weighed into that timing was if we waited until the very end, you're literally talking about October, which is in the middle of all of these elections and all of this debate. And you know, I really felt that it was better just to get this difficult conversation out of the way and then move on to more difficult conversations. We knew that regardless of when this issue came up, it was going to be an issue, because you know, administrative compensation, regardless of who it is and when it comes up, is always controversial. Doesn't matter that you're the lowest paid of the top 10 school districts. People don't care about that, but they do see the dollars. So, you know, that was part of the reason, or really the main focus, was to get it done out of the way so the district could focus on this issue and others as we move forward into the school year.
I'm sorry.
I just want to add something. In some respects, it really wasn't Dr. Atkins' decision. You know, we did have that conversation. We had it as a board. He was not eager to have the conversation. We as a board were eager to have the conversation because we were deeply concerned that unless we stood up for our superintendent, we would become vulnerable. And so, yes, we knew if there was going to be a lot of talk about it. We knew there would be concern about it, but we really felt that it was in the best interest of the contract had to be done by October 1st. So it wasn't going to happen after the election. It had to happen before the election. And we simply felt, as Dr. Atkins said, that we needed to have it sooner rather than later amidst everything else that happens in the fall.
How do you assure that many voters out there who still believe that you're misspending the budget you already have, that there isn't much more to cut, and certainly not enough to cover the new cost of schools?
Chris?
Dr. Carlin says all the time, you cannot bake sale your way out of a $478 million need. And that is what we are facing. It is a $478 million need. 10 years ago, we brought in $318 million in capital. Today, we bring in $118 million in capital. That is a $200 million per year decrease in revenue on the capital side of the house. And 30,000 more students. it is simply unsustainable. We cannot continue to grow and not build schools or not have revenue for those schools. So I don't know how you stretch $118 million per year to meet a $478 million need. I don't know how to do that. And I have frequently said, if somebody could bring me an alternative solution that would work, I would gladly accept that solution. As a fiscal conservative, the idea of a tax is very, very off-putting to me. My colleagues here have heard this story a million times. I moved here 6 years ago with my family to escape high-tax New York State. My property taxes were going up, my property value was going down, and public schools were failing my children. And now I stand in front of the public asking for an additional tax. It's very ironic, but it's also very necessary, and it is fiscally responsible to pay for schools as we build them instead of borrowing, which we've already talked about.
Okay, see, and I always thought you came down here to get as far away from Bill Belichick as you possibly could, but that's not the case. Okay, Michael.
Thank you, Tom. So we demand accountability and transparency from you. How do you, as a board, demand the same qualities from Superintendent Atkins and his employees?
We're a school district that does two things. Well, actually does more than two things, but we have a vision, and that vision is the basis for the goals that we lay out for a year, 5 years, 10 years. Now we're looking out to 2030. The kids who come into kindergarten today will be graduating in 2030. We need to think today about what they need in kindergarten so that they are ready when they graduate 12 years later. Okay, anyway, I'm getting off the track. Now I forgot what I was going to say. What was the question? Oh, yes.
Want me to repeat it?
So we have, no, I got it. So we have the plan. How do you know that you're executing your plan? You have stated expectations, measurable outcomes, and then you look. You measure and you look. So starting at the beginning of the year, and we've been doing this since Dr. Atkins came in. Every year, we have a goal for every one of our cabinet level departments. They have goals within their departments. The goals are numeric, they're quantitative. We look and see, how are the kids doing? Are they doing better? Are we closing the gap? Are the scores going up? Are we retaining more teachers? Are we becoming more efficient with our bus routes? We're very data-based so that we can assess performance of the superintendent, and the superintendent is able to assess the performance of his staff.
Well, and he is so blessed to have 7 bosses. And we each meet with him weekly, and he has to deal with each of us and our questions. So, and the benefit of that is this, that we are quite diverse in our thinking and what we bring to the table. So the questions that I will ask Dr. Atkins, and I will hold him accountable for, are going to be totally different than Ms. Patrica's. Some may be similar. But there are times where he knows that I'm not happy with things and that I really totally disagree with the movement, and I will question things. And by the way, sometimes I am proven right. But that being said, more often than not, anytime I have a question, he has them come meet with us. We go through everything. I get clarification, I give suggestions, and I give feedback. You don't have to see me have the debate and the arguments, because if I've done my job, I won't have to do it at the dais. I've been doing it with him as we meet privately. And issues that we believe need to be brought forward and provide information to all of the board members. He won't necessarily say which board member requested it, but he will say a board member requested, so I'm providing this information to you. So, yeah, I believe he feels pretty much held accountable.
Pragmatically, you know, the district is very large with 93,000 students and over 15,000 employees. And so you wonder, how do you make sure that everybody's arrow is in the right direction at the same target? And so this board strategically at the 50,000 feet level, we have our strategic goals. And our strategic goals were developed not only by us, by business leaders and community members, and we spent an inordinate amount of time developing tiered structures and our goals and objectives for each of those different goals throughout for our strategic plan. Every department has those same goals broken down, how it relates, how they impact those strategic goals. Through the technology that we've been developing through our district, and we're very blessed to have a very, very talented IT department, we actually have a dashboard. We can drill down to any particular department, any particular level, because everything they do, from every particular job, from a secretary in our maintenance department to a paralegal in the classroom, they all have goals and objectives that will roll up to, and they see how their input, their performance, which is, as Ms. Morgan said, all quantitatively measured, how that rolls up into the big picture, and it rolls up all the way up to our level. So, you may not always see what's going on at our level to know exactly in the particulars and the nuances. People say, well, this particular school had this instance. That doesn't, we look at the results as they roll up to us. Now, we can drill down to that if we need to, and we can get down to that micro level, but that's not our job. Dr. Atkins is make sure that's where he's got his people to go through, so that as things go deeper and deeper, he's got talented people at every level to make sure that everybody rolls up to the goals and objectives that we have profound.
Thank you. We got about 4 minutes left. Yemisi and Indira, I'll give you the final 2 questions. You can ask whichever questions you want to from your list. Okay, then I will just ask one school board member to respond so we can get through the question and answers. Yemisi?
Yes, thank you. We discussed Bonita High School. Some people may look at that new school as only benefiting certain people in a certain demographic, whereas underserved populations feel left behind and have been left behind. How would you address those underserved communities?
So if you look at the population within 2 miles of Bonita Springs High School, 74% of those students are minority. And if you look at the population of students within 2 miles of high school MMM, 79% are minority. We are addressing, through the use of data, minority populations. I think that there, and I'm not saying this is you, Yemisi, but I think that there's an impression in the community that we kind of close our eyes and throw a dart at a map and decide that we're going to put a school there because that's where the dart landed. Or, we got a lot of pressure from a wealthy neighborhood to put a school someplace, so we caved to that pressure. That is not at all the process that we engage in. We look at capacity numbers across the district. We look at forecasting to figure out where students are going to be moving, and we put schools where the need is the greatest. We were transporting a significant number of students from Bonita Springs to South Fort Myers High School, and South Fort Myers High School was quickly reaching capacity. That's a 16-mile drive, or a 16-mile bus ride for those students. It was unsustainable. It was costing us too much money in transportation, and there was a real need, immediate need in the South. In addition, our Equity and Diversity Advisory Committee approved that site. Back in February of 2015, they actually gave direction to the board to seek an appropriate site for a high school in Bonita Springs because they were presented with all of that data that I just mentioned to you. So in addition to that, in terms of the location, we have recently hired an Equity and Diversity director, a director of Equity and Diversity, and it is his charge, it is his job to make sure that we are not just locating schools in areas of need for minorities, but also making sure that we're closing achievement gaps, making sure that we are providing education that's culturally responsive to all of our students, not just to majority students or to white students. So he's got a big job, and I turn to him frequently for advice on how to proceed. But I think there's a strong commitment by this board, this superintendent, and this cabinet to address the needs of every single child in the district.
Indira?
So when charter schools first came on the scene, it was to help cut down on overcrowding in public schools. The district seemed to want them at the time. Why not partner with more reputable charter schools to take care of this growing need for space?
We do have a great relationship with our charter schools, and I think a lot of the misconception that people have was, first off, that in state of Florida, they don't have to actually put the charter schools where there's actually a need that serves the Lee County Public School system. They put a school district, a school wherever they want to. So a lot of schools that are put in the state of Florida are really not where schools are needed. Now, we've been blessed that a lot of our charter schools, and a good amount of them, have serve certain population groups that we encourage, that we really care for. That really help us with our charter schools. So we have a great relationship with our charter district here in Lee County, and also with the city of Cape Coral. They've got a great system as well. The problem we're having at the state level is there's continuing to be push that makes the charter school system not on the same playing ground as us. For example, if they build a school, they don't have to build it to the same level that we do. So what happens is if they build a school, they populate their school, and they close, the next day we have those children. But we can't keep them in the same location that they were yesterday, because now they're our children. We have to now either put them in portables or put them in some school, and it becomes a problem trying to displace all those students. Similarly, the new bills at the 7069 took a disparate amount of capital dollars away from public education to put it into charter schools. The problem with charter schools, even though they're non-for-profits, they're run by for-profits, and the capital, we're giving taxpayer dollars to for-profit businesses that if they close or they decide to get out of the education business, they keep that money. And there's no bond provision, there's no reason to have to do it. It's different with the city of Cape Coral, and we've had that discussion, a healthy discussion, that if the state wanted to actually fund taxpayers-owned buildings, that's a whole different argument. But we're very rare that us and Sunrise Community are the only two really state-funded, a municipality-run charter schools. Everybody else is doing the for-profit. So when you really hear about the nuances, for example, the new CRC is coming through with a constitutional amendment, and all you read about is its term limits for school district. Well, they bundled in it that you read nothing about. It's not in the title, it's not in the description, unless you go to page 11, of the dictum as far as what this bill actually provides. It allows a parallel run school system by the charter schools. So not only do we lose local control and autonomy from the district for elected officials to control the public education, they're going to run a parallel system, and that if they get funded more disproportionately because people that are financially benefiting at the state legislature from charter schools, more money's going there, will decimate public education.
Pam, did you want the final word?
I just wanted to say we have always been the stellar school district as far as working with the charter schools. We still continue that, and we will do our best for meeting our students' needs. I just have a request with regard to this charter schools is this. We have a desperate need, and the growth is out east. We have no charter companies wanting to start a school in the east zone.
Thank you. Well, it's 8:02, and we were going to finish at 8. I want to thank the school board for joining us in what was the first of its kind event like this to meet with the editorial board. I want to thank the audience for coming and listening, and hopefully getting more informed, so that when you do vote coming up in the general election, that you'll have the information necessary to make the best decision that you can. So again, thank you to everyone. Dr. Atkins, thanks. So, thanks again.